if you go back, there's a case in the Brecon Beacons, which I mentioned earlier, from 1909, Christmas 1909, when a boy of 11 was asked by his father, to have a bit of a Christmas party, to go into the yard with a bucket and get some more water from the well. It's snow on the ground, it'd been snowing. Then after a minute or two, he put his coat on and went to do it. Then they were all startled because of his screams from outside, and they rushed out, and they couldn't see him. We don't have big electronic flash lamps in those days, and he appeared to be his voice coming from the sky, and he was saying things like, "They've got me, they've got me," right?
This film will explore evidence of one of the biggest secrets on planet Earth. It is an exposé of a particular phenomenon I have been researching since 2009. I warn you, the film may shock you and could even force you to re-evaluate your entire belief system. The implications of the cover-up exposed in this film are so profound, so far-reaching. They open up many questions about who we are and what is our true place on this planet. My involvement in this research started in 2008 when I set up a website to cover information about the subject of UFOs. In 2009 I set about carrying out my own search for evidence in this much misunderstood subject. I have produced several films, all of them evidence-based, and would like to take you back to the first one made in 2009, Silent Killers, because for me this is where it all begins. Within ufology, the phenomenon of animal mutilation is well known about. In the United States, Linda Moulton Howe, an award-winning American journalist, has covered the issue in detailed documentaries, books, radio shows and on her website. Her work probably represents the most comprehensive coverage of this issue across the world, which is largely ignored or misreported by mainstream media. It involves fresh animal corpses being found with a variety of peculiar surgical injuries on their bodies, usually without blood being present. The three most common explanations offered in order to satisfy public curiosity are animal predation, satanic cults, or secret military projects. Anyone who researches the evidence in depth will quickly learn that none of these explanations satisfactorily fit the evidence. Since at least the 1970s, animal mutilations have been inextricably linked to UFO activity, because unidentified lights or craft have been witnessed in specific areas shortly before mutilated animals are discovered. In the 2009 film Silent Killers, I followed the work of David Caton and the Animal Pathology Field Unit, who have investigated cases of bizarre animal mutilation in the UK since 1997. A very quick roundup of the common injuries that are found on animals which show some kind of unexplained phenomenon, animal mutilation. What are the injuries that are found?
Well, starting at the head end, you get a very common thing is the ears to remove, sometimes to the scalp, or halfway across, often an eye or both eyes. Sometimes the lips are just excised, just showing the teeth. Sometimes there is a more extensive jaw strip, sometimes just one side, usually the left, strange if it's one, and sometimes both sides, a complete left to right strip. And then internally the organ, the tongue is removed, often from the back of the throat, sometimes halfway down or just a few millimetres from the tip. And it's usually a sort of slightly angled straight cut, and generally no blood, no bleeding, because the tongue, of course, if the animal's living and breathing, if you cut your own tongue, it's an organ that bleeds a lot more than many others. And then you will find, as you move down into the throat area, you'll find excisions into the throat and the neck, and organs removed from there. And then you'll find holes in the body of various shapes and sizes, sometimes quite small, where internal organs have been removed. And then if it's a female like a cow or a goat, udders can be removed completely, or sometimes just the teats sliced off, and not all the teats sometimes, like maybe 2 out of the 6, say. And then you will find the genitals have been sliced off very expertly. Sometimes if it's a male, it's all the genitals. Sometimes it might be just the scrotum and the penis is left. Female, again, the vulva, the genital area is excised, and then moving further around to the rectal area, you often find a neat hole into the rectum and material removed internally, so there's discontinuities between the rectum and the stomach. Often limbs are taken off as well, or partly removed, and not unknown to be tails.
If we can move it on and say, well, okay, if this is some kind of unearthly phenomena, let's just call it that, and the government knows, or certain parts of people within the civil service, whatever you want to call it, DEFRA, know about this phenomena, possibly more than you.
Yeah, that's a doubt.
The reason why they may want to play it down or cover it up is because if they know the true source of whatever it is, and we're not saying what it is, perhaps that knowledge is something that they do not want to be in the public domain.
No, well, I can have some sympathy with that. I mean, it's very disturbing. The whole subject is very disturbing. Farmers have said to me, what's going on here? And they're not getting these answers from their own farmer media, especially the government.
I have received a report and police photographs from a case in Brazil from 1988 where the body of a man appears to have similar injuries to those found in mutilated animals. If you do not wish to view these images, look away now. Jaw strip and tongue removed. Surgical holes. Rectal core. Internal organs removed. I am not saying that this man was definitely butchered by aliens, but I think it is necessary to at least mention this evidence. I have also received information from a source I believe to be reliable, but have no way of verifying, that cases of human mutilation have occurred in the UK, and that these incidents have all been covered up by the government. The source also claimed that Margaret Thatcher, acting on a request from Ronald Reagan, set up a secret group to deal with and cover up incidents of human mutilation in the UK. This film will carry on from where Silent Killers left off and examine evidence of human mutilation and the possible links to UFOs. I received a lot of feedback from the Silent Killers film. A message posted on my website forum by a viewer drew my attention straight away. Part of it read, "You mentioned Linda Moulton Howe in your film Silent Killers, so my question is, why do you not ask her about human mutilations in the UK and USA? Or is she, as I suspect, living off a more mundane story of animal mutilations? But there again, I suppose there's no money to be made in human mutilations. She sits in the comfort zone, which I find so disgusting, that other human beings know that there are human mutilations going on, yet do nothing about it." This forum post was from Derek Goff, at the time 58-year-old living in South Wales. After reading his comments, I contacted him to ask if he could expand on what he knew about human mutilations. In 2009 we exchanged several emails and telephone calls, and from these conversations his story was described in detail and concerned meetings he had with a military man in 1997. The information given to Derek Goff in these meetings is shocking and has been the focus of my research over recent months and indeed on and off for the last 4 years. Before we examine Derek Goff's story, let's briefly look at another case which seems to show some of the telltale signs. It occurred in Russia. 9 hikers who'd gone mountain climbing, were in a tent, and something happened.
Yeah, this is 1959,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some very blurry, poor images circulating around the internet. Lot of speculation what happened to them. Of course, the height of the Cold War, you know, how much information was coming out of Russia was pretty zero by and large.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently post-mortems were done, and they found the bodies, and they'd obviously been terrified the way they exited the tent. There was apparently knife cuts in it, but that might not be knife cuts. And they were found at different distances apart, but suddenly were actually in a line again. They found the bodies in a line, and but one of the females, there was two females in the party, and one of them, even from the fuzzy photographs, you can clearly see she's got a mandible strip exposing her gums and her teeth, and her eyes, both eyes are out. They don't mention the tongue missing, but I'm pretty sure they would have been.
Right.
And the report goes on to say there were the Russian authorities, or the Soviet authorities at that time, were mystified about the internal injuries. They all had internal injuries. Now that could cover a multitude of sins. You know, we don't know whether that was due to some impact or some blast effect. But they also had a lot of bone fractures, and it seemed to be synonymous with the bodies being dropped to the ground from some considerable height.
Mm-hmm.
So my view is that they were attacked by some alien beings who decided they were.
So you think they were possibly? You've looked at all the information that's available. You think they were taken up?
Yeah.
Who were maybe interested in one or two of them that they did more work on, and they dropped the rest of them
back to the ground. Yes.
Who've suffered broken bones.
Yeah. I mean, they found they tried to set up apparently some of the survivors for a time anyway. Another little survival camp area. There was evidence of a fire.
Mm-hmm.
Burnt. You know, some. I think about half a mile from the original tent position.
Mm-hmm.
When they obviously made a hasty retreat, or they were abducted from that tent initially.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just only surmise that, can't we?
Right.
And then the temperatures about -40 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they all died for one reason or another.
Yeah.
Whether some of them succumbed to the cold, you know, because they couldn't move because they got bone fractures.
Mm-hmm.
So unless we see a full report from the Russians with the post-mortem results, it's hard to judge exactly the sequence of events.
Right, we need a bit more information.
So there's a lot more information needed, but nevertheless it has, to me, the symptoms of the human mutilation, and particularly this one female whose body clearly reveals that. So the odds are that some of these poor victims of this Russian case in 1959 were devoid of their internal organs.
Right.
So to say they had internal injuries was probably not totally incorrect, but not quite accurate.
Right. After reading Derek Goff's intriguing post on my internet forum, I communicated with him via email and telephone in 2009, and having got the basic details of his story, I was keen to interview him. Certain people in the UFO field have tried to cast aspersions over Derek Goff and contend he may have fabricated his story. Having met him several times and exchanged much communication, I can vouch that Derek Goff is a 100% reliable witness. His story can be corroborated, and I have proof that his military contact is real. Derek Goff's story in outline is as follows. In 1996, Goff worked for a UFO magazine known as Global, and was the correspondent for the South Wales region. He was a keen UFO enthusiast with quite a maverick approach to his research. He would often spend the night in the outdoors in remote parts of the Brecon Beacons in his quest to gather evidence of UFO activity. In an effort to find new UFO witnesses, he put up some A4 posters in the areas where UFO activity had regularly been reported. He made the posters weatherproof by laminating them and stuck them on trees and fence posts in the Brecon and Sennybridge areas. This is his original poster, which reads, "I am a serious investigator into UFOs and other strange phenomena and would like to know if you have seen any strange lights in the sky in this area or the area where you may live. I am also looking for information from farmers who may have had cattle mutilations on their farmland properties. All information given to me will be held in the strictest confidence without question, and your name and location will not be revealed to anyone without your express permission. I am looking for photographic evidence of the above in relation to my investigation on your behalf. I can be contacted on the following number at any time convenient to yourself. In January 1997, Goff received a phone call in response to his poster appeal. The caller wanted to meet with him to disclose information linked to UFO sightings in South Wales and in other countries. Goff then had 3 separate meetings with the witness, who turned out to be a military man and worked in a NATO Black Ops team. He was one of 11 men who were selected from Special Forces regiments stationed at Hereford. The 11 were all volunteers who were asked if they wanted to be part of a special group in which the operations would be dangerous and something different. He explained to Goff the function of the team was a fast response find and secure operation. They were on 24-hour standby and would be dispatched in military aircraft, then in a helicopter, to specific locations where UFO activity had been monitored. They would land their helicopter and the team's job was to search the ground for any remains or evidence and prevent any disturbance of the site. Remains might be human corpses, vehicles, or in some cases even a landed UFO craft. It sounds incredible, but I have met with Derek Goff's source several times now, and I have verified he is real and seems genuine about having worked in a NATO Black Ops team. I will explain the information he gave to me later in the film. The reason he contacted Goff in the first place was because he had become unhappy with the operations he was being asked to undertake. During his military service, which started in the 1980s, he claims to have witnessed between 30 and 40 mutilated human beings in countries including the UK, Ireland, Scotland, Spain, Germany, Alaska, Australia, Yugoslavia and Russia. The range of different countries lends weight to the military man's further claim that the Black Ops group he was part of was a NATO-ran operation, in which the Yanks were in charge. He even said that Russia's military knew about what was going on, but were happy to leave the clean-up operations to NATO teams who had access to better technology, which I will describe later. He showed Derek Goff a NATO identity card. The bodies recovered in retrieval missions had suffered the classic neat-edged surgical incisions with bloodless remains, identical to cases of animal mutilation. Once the team had sealed off and secured an area where bodies or other evidence were discovered, a second American team, which included scientists, would then be called out to remove the remains. He referred to this team as the collectors. When corpses were removed by these teams, information would not be given to civilian authorities about the discovery of the remains. Individuals would be placed on missing persons registers indefinitely. He said the find and secure team could be on the ground for up to 5 days during an operation and would sometimes have to wait days for the collection team to arrive, fending for themselves in remote parts of the world. They would always be the first in and the last to leave. In the past, people have discredited Derek Goff because he could not prove his source was real. I can inform you that after much perseverance, I have made independent contact with Derek Goff's military source. I know his name, I know where he lives, I have film footage of him, and I have had several meetings with him.